All right, welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us, this is the Accessible and Inclusive Design Conference, and we are in our final session of the day. Can I get some interaction in the chat, reacts to make sure you can see and hear us? Hey, Cindy. Hi, Jennifer. Ooh, lots of reacts.
I know. Yay.
Look at everybody. All right, well, my name is Devin Torres. I'm filling in for Luis really quickly, so quick visual. He had some stuff to do. I am a light-skinned biracial Black woman. I am wearing glasses. My natural hair is in a bun, and I am wearing a black T-shirt. And I have the privilege of introducing my long-term LinkedIn friend, Paxton McMillan. Chris is the president of D3 Training Solutions and has over 30 years experience in training and development. For the last 20 years, her focus has been on distance learning, designing, developing, and delivering courses, the 3Ds of the D3 Training Solutions. Chris holds an MS in adult occupational therapy, focusing on distance learning, and a BS in journalism, news editing, both from Oklahoma State University. She's created courses for Phillips 66, AT&T, MCI, Hard Rock Hotel and Casino, WebCE, Federal Acquisition Institute, and the General Service Administration of the U.S. government, aka she has done it all. Since December 2000, she's been an adjunct business and IT faculty member at Tulsa Community College and is a volunteer with the Lectora Accessibility User Group, LAUG. And with that excellent resume, I'm going to hide myself from stage and go ahead and let Chris talk about steps you can do to make your course inclusive and accessible.
Thank you so much, Devin. Hello, friends. My preferred name is Chris. I am a white female in my mid-50s. I wear glasses. I have graying blonde hair, and it's put up also. And my pronouns are she and her. And I want to thank you all for being here, as these topics are so important to me for several reasons. I obviously have a visual impairment. I had my first eye surgery around 3 years old, which is really when I started wearing glasses with the nice little strap around my head. But I also grew up with an aunt and a grandfather who were blind. My non-visual, or what's referred to as hidden disabilities, include Ramsay Hunt syndrome, which Justin Bieber kind of made famous, some unilateral hearing loss in one ear due to an illness when I was 31. I have dyslexia and ADHD. Well, the dyslexia was diagnosed in elementary school, and I love that it's okay to talk about it. I was just recently diagnosed with ADHD, and that really just helps things make sense. But for the longest time, I didn't feel comfortable disclosing it, the dyslexia, for most of my life. But in 5th grade, my teacher told my mom that my chances of graduating high school were small due to my needs getting lost to the largest public school district in Oklahoma. So my mom moved to a suburban school district where I was able to get the help I needed and amazing teachers. So I actually did graduate not just from high school, but from college twice. So I'd love to go back to some of those teachers who told me I couldn't do it and be like, look, I did. Same with some classmates who may have made fun of me, but that's okay. Again, I've worked in this field since 98, and I love seeing the evolution that it's occurred over the years. But no matter how things change, I think we all can agree that we work really hard at creating interesting, engaging courses. And so, since we work so hard, our goal should really be to enhance that quality of learning so it really meets the needs for as many people as possible. Now, as we go through, a lot of people, these terms are a lot of times used interchangeably between universal design, inclusive design, and accessibility, and they really all fit under each other. Universal design has that one size fits all approach. Motion operated doors is a great example. Let me click there of universal design. Inclusive design is designed to be usable for as many people as possible, particularly groups who are traditionally excluded from being able to use an interface or navigate an environment, whether it be in real life or computer. I'm sorry, I'm pointing to my keyboard there. Accessible design is design focused on users with disabilities, and it is really a subset of inclusive design. Accessibility is really an outcome of inclusive design. So if you say you're going to be inclusive, you also have to be accessible, and vice versa. Now, many of you all may have watched Disney's Encanto, where the main character Mirabel wears glasses. And this may not, oh, you're not seeing my screen. Okay, hang on. That might help. Present to audience. I shared it earlier when I was practicing. Is it letting me share which screen? Window. Thanks so much there. Okay. So hopefully now you can see it. Can you see? Okay, thumbs up. Perfect. So basically, I showed this, and then here. So there we go. So Maribel wears glasses, and this may not really seem like a big deal because 1 in every 6 people around the world actually wear glasses. But Maribel could be the first Disney heroine to actually wear glasses. And I know as someone like myself who started wearing glasses when I was 3 years old and got called all the nicknames out there, I would have loved to have seen someone else like me and someone else deal with some of the challenges behind that. Which I also have to say, it's great that glasses, you can actually do things with glasses, whereas before I didn't ever play sports. Balls scared me because if I broke my glasses, that would be really bad. Um, Disney also recently debuted The Little Mermaid has a live action, and I would encourage you not just to see the movie. The movie is great, but also go out to YouTube and look at for videos of the children and their reaction when they see someone that looks like them. It is such a visual reinforcement that representation matters. People need to see ourselves out there. And it really is a good movie. So, uh, the first thing we all have to realize, though, is again that every learner is different. As Temple Grandin says, different, not less. And if you've never had an opportunity to meet and learn more about Temple Grandin, she is absolutely amazing. Whether they are different ages, races, or genders, whether they have specific content accessibility needs, pre existing knowledge about your training content, or no experience at all, every learner comes to the training with different backgrounds and different expectations. And so, really, that's why it's up to all of us, has these subject matter experts, has these professionals to know how to effectively deliver content and hopefully sometimes to even fight that we can deliver the content for them in a way that's best. So, how do we do this? Well, again, it's up to all of us to design your content for as many people as possible, including those with visual, hearing, motor, or cognitive limitations or disabilities. We call this concept accessible or accessibility learning. Now, again, the most important thing a developer can do is design with this in mind. And if you start it from the beginning and it becomes a habit, and hang on, sorry, I just had a beep. Make sure my do not disturb is on. There it goes. Um, Knowing how to use the tools in your toolbox will make it easier. And again, depending on your authoring tool, some of them make it a little easier and harder to do, but it becomes a habit. So, by show of hands, and you can do a reaction or whatever on there. Have you ever encountered people? I know for myself, when I ask about their accessibility needs, I often hear the response that I don't have any employees that are blind or deaf. Oh, that just thumbs up. Yes, exactly. And this may be the case in your workforce. And that statement drives me absolutely nuts. So I'm going to introduce 3 questions that you can propose to hopefully help them realize accessibility is more than just blind and deaf. Okay. So, oops, go. So, thinking about your workforce, and we're going to have to do a little math, but you can actually just write the questions down and do the math later if you want. But thinking about your current workforce, I want you to consider these questions. And this could be, again, your workforce, it could be your contractors, employees, whatever it may be. And some of the numbers are going to overlap, but how many total people work there? So that's the first math problem. Okay. So you may have to go to HR, find out, what's the total number. And again, a lot of these people that say we don't need it, if you do this, it's all numbers. They like numbers. So when you think of that total number, once you get that, figure out what is 26% of that number. Okay. Now, again, I don't care for math, so I can probably figure out 25% though without a calculator. But technically it is 26. Then thinking about, again, that total number of employees, how many of them are over the age of 40? And you may have to go to HR with this one, but just to kind of get an idea. Then thinking of, again, that total number of employees, how many of them are genetically male, meaning they have that XY chromosome? Okay. And some people may be doing a little math. And again, I just want to say some of these numbers will overlap, but this is a great way and something again I ask a lot of times when they say, we don't need accessible courses. And even if they say they don't, I still build it to where it meets level A. It doesn't really meet level double A, but we'll talk about that. So once we have those numbers, they're going to be thinking, why are you asking this? But according to the CDC, 26% of Americans have at least one disability. And I actually feel as we talk about it more, that number is going to go up. I think that number is very, very low because many people you respect are hiding their disability for fear of losing that respect, for fear of not being supported, for fear of being a burden, possibly even losing their job. This includes CEOs and brand new employees, and they are of all ages. I very rarely disclosed my disability. The one time I did, I had a director that anytime there was a typo anywhere was like, oh, it must have been Chris. Chris did it because of her dyslexia. And it was just like, I never even saw that document. And it got old. So, and many people, someone commented, yeah, many people may not even know they have a disability. I don't know that I ever really considered it a disability or my vision challenges, but you know, it is. When we think about how many people are over the age of 40, beginning in the early to mid 40s, adults are going to start having problems seeing clearly at close distances, and no one can escape that. It is because the eye lens itself is aging, and this is the most common problem adults between the ages of 41 and 60 have, and it makes working on a computer very challenging. And guess what? We all work on computers, or many of us do. Um, so, and that's just going to continue over time. Okay, and that's from the American Optometrist Association. The last question, how many people with an XY chromosome? According to the National Eye Institute, everyone actually sees color a little differently. And if you all remember, I don't remember when it was on social media, they had the dress that was either blue and white or khaki and white. Okay, we were all, I mean, that was a great example of how we see color, but even still, we all see color a little differently. But even people who aren't colorblind are going to see those differently. But those with that XY chromosome are genetically more likely to be what they refer to as CVD, is actually the technical term, which is color vision deficiency, or again, what most people would call colorblind. And 1 in 12 men, or 8%, are colorblind. And there's a little graph here of just a couple of the top 3 types of colorblindness. So now that you hopefully may have a little bit more knowledge about accessibility, when you think about what that means within your company, 26% of the workforce, those over 40, those with the XY chromosome, who do you visualize as having an impairment? Has that changed? And do you think maybe you using these questions, it can help you help others see what all is included when it comes to accessibility? So let's continue on just a little bit with this. So I'm not going to read over this. This is from the CDC, but basically, a disability is these things that just make life more difficult for a person. But the thing to remember is that spectrum of disability is quite broad and diverse when it comes to accessibility considerations. But they could really be categorized in 3 ways. People with a permanent disability, and that's the one so often people use and associate the term disability with. It is, but the thing to remember too is that disability, that is a minority group that we can join at any time in our life. The other is disabilities due to age. And again, everyone is vulnerable here. And has someone posted, a lot of people are getting diagnosed when they're older? Well, yes, because I don't know that I even heard about ADHD when I was a kid. It was just basically the dyslexia. So, I mean, we're discovering things more. And then the other would be situational disabilities. I'm not going to ask on here, but think about pregnancy even. Believe it or not, pregnancy is considered a disability, which is why it falls under short term disability when it comes to insurance. But what if you have your hand and you're holding a child and you're trying to maneuver with groceries and your keys and everything else? What if your hands are full and you're trying to walk through and carry bags or push items? There's all kinds of things where it could be situational, where you just don't have full access. Now, I'm going to circle something, this puzzle piece, really quick, because I'm going to use this example a bit to show you how this is constantly evolving. I've been talking about this topic for probably 5 or 6 years now, And oh gosh, it has to be even longer because my book's 2 years old. So, anyway, for a while, and this has evolved. And that's one of the things we have to realize. It is something that's evolving, which is one of the reasons I love this conference. So, what is accessibility? Again, not going to spend a whole lot, but just kind of the gist of it. It was developed by W3C, which is the World Wide Web Consortium. And they developed things like HTML, CSS, and they came up with these guidelines. And they are global guidelines around the world. And within training and development, and especially e learning, we basically look at Section 508 because those are the 50 guidelines we reference based on WCAG. Now, I want to also point out, so you may hear WCAG, you may hear 508, you may also hear people refer to it as ADA. Just smile and know that in their heart, hopefully their intention is good. ADA is that physical structure, that's the wheelchair ramps, the elevators, things like that. We're not physical. We're all web-based. So it's actually the 508 and the WCAG, but just know at least they're thinking about it and their heart's in the right place. So I just like to point that out. The biggest thing with any of this is to know your audience. I was in a recent discussion with a gentleman on LinkedIn, and he was like, we can't do 508 because there's no way we can meet AAA compliance. It's too expensive. It takes too long, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Who said you needed to meet AAA? There's basically, it's best to know your audience. And if you don't, just kind of figure out kind of what needs to be done. A is the minimal set. Basically, it focuses on visual and hearing limitations, basically screen readers, things like that. Minimum, I give all of my clients, even if they say they don't want it, they will get AA accessibility, which means I can also use it with if I don't have a mouse and I'm just tabbing, screen readers, things like that. AA means basically it meets those level A. It's that good, happy medium. It's not too light. It's not too restrictive. It probably has closed captioning added. That is my preferred method. AAA actually meets conformance at all the highest level. It is the most restrictive, and actually, the W3A, they say to not meet, and they don't recommend that level 3 conformance be required as a general policy. That falls back to you really need to know your audience. If you have someone in your audience that signs and needs someone that actually is going to sign, then great, you're going to go that level. But if not, just do AA. And again, progress is better than perfection. So what do we mean when we talk about these items? Well, there's 4 categories. There's the visual, which most people think of again blindness, but what about those with low vision or farsightedness, nearsightedness, astigmatism, glaucoma? Or again, what about a distracted student because they're on a train or they're somewhere and they're trying to look at something and the light's off? We have the hearing, which again, most people think of deafness or hard of hearing. But what about hearing loss due to an ear infection? Or again, maybe they're taking just in time training or micro learning in a noisy environment like an airport or a bartender or something along those lines. We have our motor, and a lot of people wonder that. I have some questions. I need those stats. Yes, I will get those over there. They need physical. We think, okay, what exactly would that mean? So those physical impairments. Has e-learning developers here? It's basically this. We need to set aside the mouse because the users may be using a keyboard, a touchpad, computer screen. So again, it says loss or damage of limbs. It could be arthritis, paralysis, multiple sclerosis, or again, it could be situational. What happens if they've got an arm or hand injury? Weekend warrior, summer's starting to close down here. So what if they're out working in the yard and they break their arm? Years ago, we'd send them off to training. Well, now training's all online. Okay, great. We'll let them do online training. Okay, but they can't use a mouse, and that's the only way they can navigate. What do you do? And last but not least, the cognitive. Those learning difficulties such as Down syndrome, neurodiverse conditions such as dyslexia, ADHD, psychological memory loss, reduced attention span. It could be mental health issues, anxiety, depression, loss of memory, limited problem solving, you name it. So we should also think about those age-related and situational or temporary impairments because, again, they could be medical or they could not. And these are ways that, again, we can help for all of our learners. And some of this ties in very well with when we get to the inclusivity. So now, kind of going over this quickly, they refer to this as POUR, which stands for, they actually took those 50 guidelines and broke them into 14 and broke them into the 4 sections: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And we're actually going to look at these. So perceivable would be that first one. This means that they have to be able to take in that information. So in doing so, this means things like our non-text information. So how are they going to communicate? Do you have your alt text? Do you have your decorative images turned off? This is where we also talk about things like that flashing content that could cause distress or even seizures. When it comes to audio, video, or animations, do you have things like synchronized captions? I know a lot of people are like, why just add a script? Okay, a script is a start, but what about adding those synchronized captions too? Okay. The learner has to be able to control the action, and this is probably a challenge I run into my second most once they decide they do want to go with accessibility, is they want all the audio and video to autoplay. Autoplay is okay, but they have to be able, if that auto goes over 5 seconds, they have to be able to turn it on or off. And so for me, what I like to do is I start out at the beginning with a screen that says, "This course contains audio. Would you like the course to start the audio automatically, or do you want to do it yourself?" And that way they can click. If they want to start automatically, I just create a variable called autoplay and it starts automatically. If they don't, they get to do the control. Whatever you do, do not say, if you're using a screen reader, do this, because it may be more than just screen readers. Okay. I'm getting some great comments come through too. The structure and presentation, again, too, we need to, this is where we give them options on that presentation and set things up. This again comes from the World Wide Web. And so they're used to dealing with the web where they can tab through, they know what the headings are, and this has to do with some HTML coding, which I am not an HTML expert. But they give those headers, basically H1 through H6 are your options. And I usually use H1 or H2. I'll use the other H's if I have a graph and I'm needing to direct it. And basically what that does, it allows them, it tells if they're tabbing where they need to go, or if they're screen reader where they need to go and work with next. In addition to, last but not least, would be under POUR, which you can kind of see the P's enlarged, but we also talk about color contrast. When you're using color to express meaning or identify an object, always, always, always make sure there's another meaning. So an example would be, please do not say, select the orange button to continue. Okay, how do I know which button is orange? You could say, select the orange next button to continue, including both features of the button allows, again, both those visuals and screen reader users to follow the instructions. The other thing I wanted to plug in here, because I always have people ask, because it talks about the text size. Well, how do you know what size regular text is from large or bold? I'm going to date myself here. Years ago, when we started doing distance or e-learning, 10 or 12 point was basically what we'd use. Now, pretty much 14 point has a minimum, and that's going to be what's considered regular text. If you bold even that 14 point, or if it's considered large, which is anything over 18 point, then that kind of changes that contrast requirement. So, and I've got several comments coming in. I'm going to try to see if I can scoot this over so I can see a little more. There it goes. Much better. Okay, autoplay, and yes, fantastic. Autoplay controls, yeah, and depending on time, I can actually, well, actually in the ebook that I'm offering to you guys at the end, that again, it's free, but you'll have to download it yourself. I have a picture of my sample where I basically say, do you want the auto to autoplay or not? So, okay. So then we move into our O, which is operable. So basically here, what we're talking about is that functionality, okay? So most of us use a keyboard and a mouse. What my challenge for you all is to put those things up. If we're talking about keyboard accessibility, Stick those to the side, and when you're testing, use things like your tab key, your shift key, your space bar, page up and down, and your arrows, and see if you can actually go through it. See if it makes sense in that accessibility, if it's going for where you want it to go. That part of it has to do with the focus. So basically, when focus is concerned, it is that interactive portion that's the first thing they see on the screen. Okay. And as they tab through, it kind of just brings their attention to where they need to go next. Okay. Jeremy, I love your comment there about NVDA. We'll mention that one in a minute. And that also has to do with that keyboard and that content order. The other thing that we think about is that navigation. And so it needs to be consistent. So, and this helps not only for accessible users, but for regular users too, non-accessible users, because we're busy. I don't want to have to go through and figure out, okay, where's the next button? What does this button mean? Where is this? We want it to be consistent. So we're not concentrating on the function of the course, but actually the content of the course. And then I'll end on the O with a button size. When you're creating that button, make sure it's large enough that if someone has a slight tremor on their hand and they're trying to use their mouse even, that it's going to stick on it, or that there's enough white space around it so they don't actually end up collecting and clicking on something else. I can tell you that's very frustrating. Oh, I thought that was the last one. The other would be progress indicator. You need to have some type of progress indicator on there. And with that, basically what I mean, it's not, I love the visual indicators that tell me where I am, but we also need to have a clear progress indicator that says things like page 3 of 20, page 4 of 20, and so forth. And I usually overlap mine and hide one from a screen reader because it's the visual and then show the other one. So then that takes us to U, which is understandable. And now that means that the user must be able to fully comprehend the content presented and the way it's presented. And this ties in really well. We'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about inclusive. But basically, we need, for a writing style, we need clear and simple language. The content or operation must not go above their cognitive ability to understand. Now, couple ways to think about this. If the navigation actions are easy and predictable, they're easier to understand. If I'm moving them around all the time, it makes it a little more challenging. My undergrad was journalism. And one thing that they taught us back then in the 90s and 80s was to write at an 8th grade level. And when I used to tell this story, people would get all upset that I can read better in 8th grade level. Are you calling me dumb or whatever it may be? And it's like, that's not what we're saying at all. It doesn't have anything to do with that reading or comprehension. I like to think of it as it's that first day of looking at things, and we're speed reading and we're looking at it quickly, and it's our comprehension level. It just makes it easier or quicker to understand. Sorry, something must be outside if you heard my dogs there. Um, Nowadays, they're actually saying write at a 6th grade level. This is also helpful, which we'll talk about when we get into the inclusivity area, for people that maybe English is a second language, or again, they may be on the have some cognitive challenges, and we'll talk about that. Again, the text, kind of said that one already. Be careful about your font type and size. Stick to fonts that everyone's going to have on their computer, and make sure it's probably, I mean, those beautiful scripts, some of them are gorgeous, but they're really hard to read. And you need to be careful about that. And I like to give the example, unfortunately, of my own wedding invitations. I did a pale green because I love green, but I chose a white and I chose a script, and it looked gorgeous when I was comparing it. Yeah, when they were printed, they were really hard to read. So, do as I say here, not as I do, wasn't the best. Same is true with alignment. Try to keep it left aligned. And yes, I will share the resources for writing for a 6th grade. I'll have to look those back up, but I can get those over. And hopefully you all are in the TLDC chat, or you can always reach out to me directly and I can locate that. So be careful about things like putting things in all caps unless it is truly acronyms. Italics can be hard to read. Those shadows, those glows, all those things can make things difficult to read. Also, again, be sure to use real headings like that H1, H2, actual paragraphs. And if you're using bullets, use real bullets if you can versus those decorative images because a screen reader isn't going to recognize that decorative image and it won't say bulleted text, blah, blah, blah. Okay. There's a lot of cool stuff that goes on behind in screen reader. Great question. What about all caps and sans serif font like Arial, Segway, Times New Roman? Again, I think it depends on what it's for when it's in all caps, because the screen readers will often read, if it's in all caps, it will actually read it as if it is an acronym versus actually a word. So, yeah, you should have seen one of the words I accidentally said this morning for class. It was like, oh, slow down. Last but not least, we get to to the R for robust. And here it's just basically means that it needs to remain available to users no matter what their technology is. So this is where a couple of people mentioned this too, is you're going to test your content. Put your mouse aside and turn on and test your content. I would encourage you, there's several screen readers out there. If I'm testing for keyboard accessibility, I don't need anything special. I just set my mouse aside and I use my keyboard. If I'm testing for the screen readers, the two main ones are JAWS and NVDA. And JAWS stands for Job Aid, Job Access with Speech. NVDA is Non-Visual Desktop Access. Yes, this course is being recorded. And with those, NVDA is free. You can make a donation, which I would encourage you all to do if you're using it. I know I did. JAWS has a cost, but it will still give you a good idea to test and see how things work. And I would really encourage you to understand how it works and some of the headaches people may feel. Now, I did have someone, I was helping them kind of test, and they're like, well, I need to slow this down. How do I do that? And I was like, I promise you, screen reader users, the ones that I know, they actually listen at 1.5 to 2 times the speed. I mean, because they know what they're listening for, which means it's our responsibility as developers to make sure we set things up so it's consistent to the web, which is how they know how to use it. So, double check to make sure your hidden content isn't read by the screen reader. Okay. And if it is hidden and then shown, is it read to the screen reader at the appropriate time? Because I know sometimes that can be a challenge in dealing with screen readers and rapid development tools. And again, if you add a PDF, basically that PDF is in addition to, not in place of your content. So you may have an accessible PDF document linked to a menu. It can aid learners when they're dealing with that navigation or interaction, but it needs to be in addition, not in place of. You don't want to create this amazing interactive course and then just give someone a PDF. That just, no, just don't do it. So now we kind of understand a little bit about accessibility, and I love your questions. Thank you so much. What about inclusive design and practice? And here we're talking about creating that culture of inclusiveness that is so much more than offering annual diversity training and hoping it makes an impact. Now, when it comes to designing for inclusivity and diversity, my first and most important point as a white cis female designer in an industry already dominated by white cis designers is, if you fit that description, get comfortable being uncomfortable. Embrace change. Immerse yourself in diversity. Build teams, and I would actually add in there, make friends with people that include people from all ages, genders, sexualities, from all different types of backgrounds, cultures, and countries. The more diverse our teams and collaborations are, and I include I like to think of it as our personal team of family and friends, the stronger and more inclusive our designs will be and our thinking will become. I would love to put all of us out of business that speak about DEI and accessibility where we don't need to do this because everybody just does it. And we're not there yet. And so we need to embrace it. Sorry, get on my tangent a little bit. So again, while accessible design is concerned with the mechanics that everyone can hear, see, or read your message, inclusive asks you to consider the message itself. It requires putting a greater level of understanding and empathy and asks you to put yourself in someone else's shoes. So not only can everyone use it, do they want to use it? And more importantly, do they feel safe in doing so? So what do we need to do? Well, the first thing is to identify and remove bias in our writing. Now, I hear from people sometimes that they're like, I don't have any biases. I see one color, I see this, or I see this. And it's just like, okay, bias is natural. Okay. And there's going to be unconscious bias. And this can be overcome. The human brain is this amazing computer, and it is flooded with all kinds of information about the world we live in and our experiences. When presented with all of this information, the brain takes shortcuts. And so, if we are, especially as instructors and developers, are aware of our own biases and countering those stereotypes, we can reduce the strength and the effect of that unconscious bias. So, you know, work towards it. The other would be talking about, so part of it is through talking about bias and diversity. One question that really surprises people when I get a new client in the workforce, I ask them, what are their organization's demographics? Do they have an equal split of men to women in their company? Are they LGBTQ plus IA inclusive? Do they employ impaired and or disabled individuals? Again, kind of depends on the preferred terms, and where are they located in the United States or abroad, because attitudes are different depending on where you are. These are all things to keep in mind when planning and developing and designing training. Uh, Now, it can be a double edged sword completely. Um, when selecting visual images, we also need to be aware of the situations and positions we put these characters in. So we want to visually represent diversity, but is every manager portrayed by a white man? Are there any roles played by those in the visual, such as, or what are the roles played by the individuals? Is anyone a token character? Are all the women subordinate, i.e., office staff? Are all the factory workers minorities? Is the dress gender based with all the women in short skirts? And I intentionally have a skirt on the lady at the end to show that she's got a prosthetic leg. um, but yes, otherwise there. Are there and should there be people with religious or cultural headgear or other clothing? That full range of human diversity, which includes things like ethnicity, race, size, ability, social economic background, and gender, needs to be included. Now, earlier I mentioned the puzzle piece, and this was a piece, a symbol of autism, originally used by the Autism Society. But after some studies have come out, it actually invokes a negative connotation for many people with autism. So they have updated it to the rainbow color infinity symbol. And this is now a popular symbol among autistic people and autism rights advocates. So again, it evolves. So, where do we get the images? As I mentioned, I've been in this field for a long time. I want to keep this slide up for just a second in case you want to take a screenshot. Again, if not, we can send it out. In the past, it was challenging to find stock photography or video that appropriately reflected minority, ethnic, or societal groups that weren't really blatant stereotypes and disrespectful. But now we have access. Some of these are paid sites, many of these are free sites. I encourage you to go out and take a look. Okay. Whoops. Winding it down here. So, the other thing we need to do is think about our voices. When designing diverse and inclusive training, we can increase the variety of vocal talent by ethnic group, age, gender, dialect, and sound. Sound is really powerful. But when selecting voices, return the discussion of diversity within the company. I use this to ask, what characters or narrators do you include? Do you have any internal audio talent? And everybody always says, no, we don't have professional actors. But what I like to ask then is, what about people who sang in a choir? And I know this kind of sounds weird, but people who sang in a choir, whether it be high school, whether it be their religious, whatever it may be, professional, who knows, they know how to pause and breathe, reducing that requirement or need for us as the editors to either re-record or edit. So with that in mind, can you source local vocal talent within your company for authentic accents and dialectical speech? If your current talent pool doesn't, there's many tools that will create audio using text to speech. Many of them are built into our rapid development tools, but there's also places like Will Said Labs, Morphe, if I'm saying that correctly, or Amazon Poly Voices. You can also look for voice talent online. here I put in, you can kind of sort of see that there. I used voices 1, 2, 3, and I filtered by gender and age, and I typed in female with a Southern accent. I found 79 results. When you are doing this, though, I want to add a disclaimer. A request such as this, again, being that Southern accent, you want to make sure you're not looking for a cartoon or overly exaggerated Southern accent. Fake accents are at best counterfeit and at worst insulting. So those authentic voices, however, really resonate power throughout every aspect of the organization. Great question. Doesn't research show that learners retain more when you use human rather than speech to text? Yes, they definitely do, versus the text to speech. Some of that text to speech, though, that AI is really coming a long way. There are quite a few out there. And again, as AI progresses, there are quite a few out there that I have trouble telling if it was text to speech or if it was a real voice. That's the Amazon voices when it came out were great. I don't use those too much anymore. I actually use Well Said Labs. Some of those are quite amazing, in my opinion. Again, I've also got some hearing loss, though, so I may not hear as well. Um, the other thing we want to do when we think about inclusive practices is make sure that understanding, and this I reference this when we think about accessibility, but this means that the users need to be able to fully comprehend the content presented, that clear and simple language. And I had several people ask where I got my information, and I'm bummed at myself that I don't have it cited at the bottom. As a teacher, shame on me. I will get that information out. But it really needs to make sure we don't go above their cognitive ability. So it may not be in their English, may be their second language or whatever language you have the content in. It may not be their native language, or they may again have those cognitive challenges. So we need to be careful. We also need to be careful about phrases. Click over there. For these gendered or exclusive terms, um, when I started in college, I went to a lady to help me because my accent growing up on a rural area on a farm, it was pretty strong and it's still there. But one of the things I used y'all all the time, and they're like, you can't do that. So we started switching to guys because back in the late 80s, early 90s, guys was considered a gender neutral term. Well, now it's not. It is evolving. And so now I'm working very hard to stop saying guys and go back to y'all because now y'all is acceptable, whereas earlier it wasn't. So again, just know this is evolving and we need to be careful, folks, friends. I usually, if it's face to face, I say hello, friends. So definitely, and we'll give some alternatives out here. You may say team, everyone, employees, teammates, folks, volunteers. Visitors, members, kind of whatever it may be. We also need to be careful about slang and phrases because if I were to say something like ants in your pants, for our international staff members, visitors, ESL learners, or anyone who may identify on the neurodivergent spectrum, they may not understand. And we want to make sure we put things people first in most cases. Not an asthmatic woman or a dyslexic woman. I am a woman with asthma and a woman with dyslexia. Now, this is evolving because there are some cognitive impairments such as ADHD, autism, Asperger's, where a lot of people want to go identity first. And this is a growing movement in the autistic community to reclaim the term autistic, thinking that if they use the first language when describing themselves, that it's describing something that if we do it the other way, it's describing something that could be cured and removed from the person. So again, just know your audience is the biggest thing. When in doubt, use people first, and better yet, ask your audience. The other thing I want to get to is pronouns. Now, you may refer from the beginning, and I hope everyone I've listened to are doing this. I introduced myself with my name and my pronouns. Lead by example when you introduce yourself, but please, please, please do not require everyone to share their pronouns. I teach at the college, and I said, share your pronouns if you're comfortable. If not, don't. Because I have run into some college professors are like, oh, I required it. And it's like, some people aren't comfortable with that. They may not either be out or there's all kinds of reasons. So when we think about pronouns, If you lead by example, it takes the pressure off people from having to answer. And again, they know that's comfortable to do so. And when I first saw this artwork, I was like, oh, yay, this is great. But the other thing I want to point out is be careful. Why this looks like a really cool graph, there's something blatantly wrong here. And that is the word preferred. um, want to caution people on their phrases that you may think are being inclusive, but actually aren't. And that would be something like preferred pronouns. It's not preferred, it's just pronouns. Sexual preference, it's not sexual preference. Just be careful. Yeah, I love this star. Thank you. Ice cream is a preference. Pronouns are either correct or incorrect. Exactly. And you may make mistakes, and that's okay. You just apologize and get to going. I have a nephew that, we've had a lot. He's like, Aunt Chrissy, I know you're trying. And I was like, thank you. It's taken a while because I've known him for so long. It's a little easier when you first meet people, at least I think. So, pronouns. The last I want to add is family assumptions. This is very personal to me. Instead of family assumptions about a relationship that assuming there is a mom and or a dad, use things like spouse, partner, significant other, guardian, parent, caregiver, grown up, family, whatever it may be. Please don't make those assumptions that it was the same family background that you may have had or that you expect everybody else to have. So, again, ask in advance. If you're not sure about something, it's fine not to know. Find out where to go to get that reputable answer and be okay to get feedback from other people. I cannot wait to go back and look at the feedback from you all because that's one of the reasons in these conferences keeps me up to date because I know my experience. We're almost done here. Another thing I want to is that exclusive language and language samples. And I'm going to, on the left here, what we're seeing are things that are not very inclusive. And then what the alternative would be. So, grandfathering, that was a huge deal. Talking with technology, we're going to grandfather your phone line. That's not it. Your contract or whatever it is, your minutes per hour or whatever it was. The term now should be legacy. We all probably heard on the news this past year about Beyonce and Lizzo with the headlines with the term spastic. Lizzo, and I think Beyonce did too, but I love the way Lizzo came out and said, I didn't realize it was harmful. I never wanted to promote that. And she changed. There was a new version of her song soon afterwards. I mean, fantastic. Handicap parking, we're now seeing that as accessible. Master and slave, that was used a lot in IT, thinking about the where the memory is and where the feeds are. I'm not an IT person in that sense, but now we're seeing that as primary and replica or standby. We're even seeing that in the real estate world where there are a lot of thinking instead of that master bedroom. And we have people, are people overreacting some terms? It's their reaction. I think our goal should be to be as inclusive and welcoming as possible because I never want to intentionally mess something up or make people feel less by something I've said or something I've written. Jude to me is that's again another one that's very, very personal. Well, okay, well maybe it's something to negotiate. The last thing I want to do is if you're on LinkedIn, you can, of course, connect with me, but you can actually alter your feed by commenting and liking people who post about accessibility and inclusion. And so this is if it's something that you're actually passionate about, and I would hope you would be or you wouldn't be here, I encourage you to connect with all of the AIDC, the Accessible and Inclusive Design speakers, the table host, the people who are announcing, things like that. In addition to AIDC speakers, I would also include the following in no particular order. They're alphabetical order. Some of these people will actually talk about their disabilities. Some of them don't. Some of them are just very progressive and wanting. They post a lot, and it's a great way to stay on top of it. Great question. I would use tribe when referring to a specific tribe. Yes. In that case, yes. And when I worked for Cherokee, we would refer to it as Cherokee Nation and citizens. We would actually refer to it versus tribal members. We refer to them as citizens within the nation. So Um, the other thing I want to give you guys is I have 2 ebooks. They are free. One is called Making E-Learning Accessible. I had a contributor in that one, a main contributor, and then How Accessibility is Changing, Why It Matters, and What You Can Do. I was just a co-author on, but these are free and out there for you. I've got kind of a PDF summary of this course that I will get and we'll figure out how to share with everybody. And I'm going to go back. I'm going to leave this up for just a second. Could I add the link in the chat? Yeah, I bet I can. Whoa. Okay, hang on. Oh, perfect. Thank you. You guys are good there. So I'm going to leave that link there and I'm going to scroll back because I had people ask about the statistics here. So there were my questions. If you need those, although you can form the questions from the answers, but here's the actual answers from the CDC, American Optometrist Association, and National Eye Institute. I know that was one of the questions. Okay, and I'm trying to see if there's actually a QA section. So what questions do you all have for me? I'm trying to scroll. You guys were so awesome. Again, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it is definitely not safe for someone to reveal their transgender. I was honored that my nephew actually revealed to me, actually before he revealed to his mom and dad. And it's still one of those things that certain family members don't necessarily know because it's just not a good deal. Not my nephew, but a couple other people. Maybe parts of this, maybe we can edit out. Actually, I don't have family members that'll be attending. So please go back to the fourth pour. Yes. Go ahead. Let's see. So it's robust. There. Whoops. It helps to get the stuff up there. There you go. So there's the fourth pour. Yes. I love it. It's tough to come out to people closest to you because their opinion. Yes. So, and we all should be able to be our true selves. That's huge. And especially in our workplace and where we're around and
And Chris, it does look like we have questions popping up in the QA.
Okay, let me see where I can get
I'll go ahead and sorry, had it from stage. The first one are, what are your thoughts on including gender, race, and or ethnicity in image alt text?
I think it depends on the purpose of the text, and there's a lot of discussion actually on that. So I'm just going to put my opinion from what I've read. I'm not the expert in that. I would say I usually put gender in. Actually, a lot of times I just say 2 hands, blah blah blah, and I take that out so that way I try to make it as neutral as possible, and that way people can read themselves when they're reading it. Because if I am a female, I'm probably going to, in that alt text, assume everybody there is a female type of thing. So I probably don't. Now, if it is a course we actually just did one for FDIC, and it was on DEI. So in that case, yes, we went very specific in our alt text to include what genders they were, what race they were, you name it, trying to show that the course itself was being inclusive for the screen readers. But again, that goes back to, I think, some of that intention and what the end purpose is.
Perfect. We also have, how do you address those questions when dealing with higher education? I know you'll love this one. I don't have a student with a documented disability, so I don't have to use captions, for example.
Okay. One of the first things I do is with my students, because I've actually had that happen, I go through and first I want to talk to the student about, but my local community college, our accessibility department is amazing. And so first I talk to them to see, it's like, okay, why aren't you going? Okay. Is there a way, are you not comfortable? They may not even know about it because they can help give them the tools needed to get what they need. If they aren't comfortable in the long run because they don't want to be labeled, they don't want to be this. That's been my biggest conflict is that people are like, well, I don't want that label following me. Well, I can tell you from a teacher, it isn't in any of the materials that I have access to, at least. I get an email. In fact, I got one this morning. I thought it was for pregnancy, but I usually get an email saying, I have no idea what the situation is, but here's what the user needs. They need to sit up front. They need closed captioning. They need this. And the cool thing is if they will go and speak with someone in their accessibility department, that actually gives me as a developer additional tools so I can get the stuff converted a little quicker. So if they're not comfortable with it, then it's one of those that I can do what I can, but has for myself, since I'm not a full-time instructor and some of the content comes down to me, I don't have those raw files to create or the time to create that accessibility. Anything I create personally always does. So did that hopefully answer it?
I think that covered the question.
Okay.
We have one more that I can see. I have tried testing e-learning courses using JAWS and NVDA, and I find these very useful, but still feel the need for coaching around using these tools effectively. Are there any recommendations?
That is a great, great question. I am still learning myself a bit. I have never used JAWS because it is rather expensive and has a one-person business. I use the NVDA. There are some tips and tricks, and I've got actually not that you can see. Hang on. Yeah, there's some great examples on YouTube. I have a little sticky note that I keep here that just kind of reminds me, okay, here's how to start. Here's this. Um, to navigate around. So I take lots of notes, but there are some great YouTubes out there that do a couple things. One, they can show you shortcuts on how to use it. Sorry, I'm trying to get this stuck back on my monitor. But then there's also some that you can watch to where you see how they process it. They will actually show you the page and then they'll show you, or you get to listen to what the screen reader does. So you get to see where it happens. And to me, that is just so powerful and amazing.
Thank you for that. And we have other people putting resources in the chat.
Awesome.
So I know we're kind of keeping a running tab of stuff. So hopefully we can get that out to you at the end of this.
You may also reach out to, I've reached out to my local community college. Like I said, they've got an amazing program. I had someone reach out to me that needed a sign language person, and I'm like, oh, we've got lots. We've got a great sign language program, which I am in the process of learning. So, family. It's one of the few, that was my word yesterday. Um, but you may also be able to reach out because so many people on whether hire someone as a screen reader, do some proofing and editing within your company. I love hiring some of our students that are kind of on the spectrum because, many people, if they're on the spectrum, they are great at proofing and finding comma splices and typos and all these things. And so, you may want to reach out to a local community college and see if there's something. And that way you're helping them and maybe enlightening them on a skill or a job that they never even thought about having. So,
Yeah, thank you again for sharing those resources.
no
I
problem.
know we don't always use the community. We always don't think about the community stuff we have around us, but it seems like more people are
Exactly.
popping some in the chat. I am not going to come on screen to close this out because I have something odd going on with my video, but and I don't know if Luis is back yet. But if not, yeah, thank you everybody for hopping on and attending. We have a couple more great days. I know tomorrow we're starting off with Susie Miller's masterclass on accessible
She's
and
amazing.
inclusive design. Ooh, see, good
I,
plugs.
I've got her book up here, and if you saw all the sticky notes in it and the highlighting.
Courtney, we will check on that. I am not 100% sure about the PowerPoint, but I know we are recording and we'll share those videos.
And if we can't do that, I do have a kind of PDF document that kind of goes along with it. And if we can figure out a way to share that, I'm completely good with that too.
Awesome.
So,
Chris, thank you so much. I'm glad we got to kind of chat in person
I
officially.
know.
And thank you everyone who attended, and we will see you all tomorrow and the rest of the week.
Can't wait to see you all in other sessions. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.